The Veskarian High Command stood frozen before the holographic display, 6 pairs of compound eyes reflecting the impossible image before them. Fleet Admiral Kursoth's mandibles clicked in nervous agitation as he watched what could only be described as a tear in the very fabric of reality expanding near the contested border of Sector 87. "What in the seven hells are we looking at?" demanded Supreme Tactician Morvell, her crystalline exoskeleton glittering under the emergency lights. "Unknown, Supreme Tactician," replied the sensor officer. "But the quantum disturbance is unlike anything in our archives. The humans call it Project Abaddon." A collective hiss escaped the assembled leadership. For 3 decades, the mighty Veskarian Empire had systematically annexed the outer colonies of humanity. The bipedal mammals fought valiantly, but were hopelessly outmatched in numbers, technology, and martial prowess. Or so they had believed. Humanity's fall had seemed inevitable after the loss of their critical staging grounds at Proxima Centauri. The Veskarians had celebrated for 7 rotations, secure in their impending total victory. That confidence now evaporated like morning dew under twin suns. "Magnify!" ordered Kurtsoth. The hologram zoomed in, revealing a massive vessel emerging from the spatial anomaly. Its hull was midnight black, absorbing rather than reflecting surrounding starlight. Cruel angles and bizarre geometries defined its structure, seeming to hurt the eye that tried to follow them too closely. Ancient runes glowed along its surface with malevolent crimson light. "Dimensions?" Kurtzoth's voice had dropped to barely a whisper. 28 kilometers in length. Mass incalculable, sir. Our systems cannot reconcile the readings. Morvell stepped forward, her expression unreadable behind her alien features. "The humans have been pushed to extinction's edge. This is their final gambit." Deep within the mysterious warship designated Abaddon, Commander Vera Oranth stood on the bridge, her silver-flecked eyes scanning data streams flowing through neural interfaces. The retired war hero had been called back for one final mission, one desperate enough that humanity had opened the forbidden vault beneath Europa. "All systems nominal, Commander," reported Lieutenant Riker Dorn, his skin bearing the phosphorescent tattoos of the Mars resistance. "The entity contained within. The drive core has been fully integrated." Vera nodded grimly. "And the crew's psychological barriers?" "Holding at 93% efficiency. Dr. Naledi estimates we have 72 hours before significant degradation begins. 72 hours to save what remained of humanity. It would have to be enough." The vessel they commanded was no ordinary warship. Project Abaddon represented the culmination of forbidden research dating back centuries, the harnessing of extra-dimensional energies that ancient cultures had once called demonic. The scientists who created it had gone irrevocably insane. The test pilots who flew the prototype had returned changed, speaking in tongues and carving strange symbols into their flesh. Yet here they were, humanity's last hope, piloting a warship, literally powered by something from the metaphorical depths of hell. "Message from Fleet Admiral Kaushal," announced Communications Officer Lysandra Idris. "The diversionary attack on the Veskarian shipyards at Tau Ceti has begun." "Acknowledge receipt," Vera commanded, "and prepare to broadcast on all Veskarian I frequencies." She straightened her obsidian uniform, emblazoned with the blood-red insignia of Project Abaddon, a stylized gate with chains broken. "This is Commander Vera Oranth of the Terran vessel Abaddon," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of billions of lives riding on her shoulders. "To the Veskarian High Command, you believed you knew the limits of human capability. You were mistaken. You believe you have driven us to extinction. Again, you are mistaken." Her eyes narrowed as she delivered the final line, one that would soon echo through the terrified communications of the entire Veskarian Empire. "Humanity is not trapped here with you. You are trapped here with us." The response from the Veskarian fleet was predictable, a full barrage of disintegration beams and quantum torpedoes. Hundreds of weapons designed to shatter planetoids converged on Abaddon's position. Lieutenant Dorn gripped his console. Impact in 3, 2. The weapons struck, creating a blinding flash visible across 3 star systems. For a breathless moment, the Veskarian command center erupted in premature celebration until the sensors cleared. Impossible, whispered Kurzoth as the image resolved. The human vessel floated untouched in the void, surrounded by a shimmering crimson field that seemed to writhe and twist like something alive. Where the energy weapons had struck, strange symbols briefly flashed, reminiscent of ancient sigils. They didn't just survive, Morvel observed, her voice tight. The vessel absorbed our attack. Aboard Abaddon, the bridge crew maintained rigid discipline despite the eldritch energies coursing through the ship. Chief Engineer Alara Kane's voice came through the comm, strained but professional. Core containment holding at 87%, Commander. The entity is pleased by the attack. Power reserves increasing. Viera acknowledged with a grim nod. The being they had harnessed, discovered in the void between dimensions during humanity's desperate research, fed on. Violence directed against it. The Veskarians couldn't have chosen a worse strategy. Helm, bring us toward their command ship, Viera ordered. Weapons, prepare the Malabulge array. Navigator Pax Valerian, his eyes permanently altered to see multiple dimensions simultaneously, plotted the course. The dimensional instabilities are within acceptable parameters, Commander, approaching optimal firing position. Throughout the ship, crew members performed their duties with practiced efficiency, despite the whispers that sometimes filtered through their thoughts. The entity bound within Abaddon's core occasionally reached out, offering glimpses of power. Beyond mortal comprehension, every crew member had been psychologically screened for resistance to such temptations. Most would hold, some would not. In her private quarters, Dr. Naledi Josa reviewed the brain scans of the crew, noting with concern the spreading patterns of altered neural activity. The entity's influence was growing faster than projected. She opened a secure channel to the commander. Commander, we need to accelerate the timetable. The psychic barriers won't hold beyond 48 hours, not 72 as we estimated. On the bridge, Vera received this information with outward calm, though inwardly she felt cold dread. Understood, Doctor. Maintain monitoring protocols. She turned to Tactical Officer Ezra Ambrose. Status of the Malabulge array? Charged to 60% capacity. The entity is eager to deploy it. The Malabulge array represented technology humanity had never intended to create. Weapons that didn't just destroy matter, but corrupted the fundamental laws of physics within the target area. Even the development team had been horrified by their creation. Across the void, the Veskarian command vessel deployed its own secret weapon. A massive cannon extended from its bow, powered by the combined output of 3 stellar taps. The Sunbreaker, Morvel identified. No shield in known space can withstand it. Fleet Admiral Kurzoth hesitated only briefly before giving the order. Fire. A lance of concentrated stellar plasma, hot enough to vaporize moons, lashed out across space. It struck Abaddon dead center, enveloping the human vessel in artificial solar fire. For 17 agonizing seconds, nothing was visible but the blinding conflagration. Then, slowly, impossibly, a silhouette appeared within the inferno. Abaddon emerged, its hull glowing with captured energy, the runes along its surface pulsing like heartbeats. The crimson field surrounding it had grown denser, taking on shapes that hurt to look upon directly. They cannot be stopped by conventional means, Kurzoth realized, genuine fear in his voice for the first time in his 3-century military career. Order all civilian vessels to evacuate the sector. Send word to the Emperor. The humans have created something unholy. Aboard Abaddon, alarms blared as several crew members collapsed, blood trickling from their eyes. The entity was feeding on the attack, growing stronger and hungrier. Viera made her decision. We can't wait any longer. Target their command ship and fire the Malabulge array. Full power. Ezra looked up, his eyes momentarily flashing with an unnatural light. With pleasure, Commander. The Malabulge array discharged with a sound no one would ever be able to describe afterward. A noise that seemed to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions. A beam of absolute darkness, anti-light that consumed rather than illuminated, lanced from Abaddon toward the Veskarian command ship. Where it struck, reality itself seemed to fold inward. The massive vessel didn't explode or disintegrate. It warped, twisting into impossible geometries, before collapsing into a singularity no larger than a human fist. Then, that too vanished with an audible snap that propagated through space, leaving nothing but empty void where the pride of the Veskarian fleet had been. Silence fell across all communications channels as the remaining alien vessels processed what they had witnessed. On Abaddon's bridge, Vera fought to maintain composure. "Status report." "Target eliminated," replied Ezra, his voice carrying an unsettling resonance. "The entity requests permission to target the remainder of the fleet." Vera studied her tactical officer carefully. The subtle changes were becoming more pronounced. The slightly too wide smile, the unnatural stillness. She made a subtle hand gesture toward Security Chief Inigo Remora, who nodded imperceptibly. "Denied," she said firmly. "We will offer them one chance to retreat." Deep within engineering, Elara Kane worked frantically to reinforce the containment field around the entity. The alien presence hammered against its metaphysical barriers with growing frustration, its hunger awakened by the taste of destruction. "The runes are degrading faster than anticipated," she reported through the comm. "Each weapon discharge weakens our control." Dr. Naletti's voice joined in, urgent and concerned. "Commander, we have 12 crew members now showing advanced signs of influence. Security has contained most, but 3 are unaccounted for." This was deteriorating faster than their worst projections. Vera made a rapid series of calculations. The original mission had called for the systematic destruction of 7 key Veskarian fleet installations. At their current rate of degradation, they might manage 3 before losing control completely. "Navigator, plot a course to the Veskarian shipyards at Bellatrix," she ordered. "We'll hit their primary construction facility next." As Abaddon prepared to jump, the surviving Veskarian vessels scattered in disarray. Their tactical doctrine had no provision for facing a weapon that violated the fundamental laws of physics. Supreme Tactician Morvel, now commanding from a secondary vessel, watched with growing horror. "They're heading for the Bellatrix yards. Alert all forces in the sector. Deploy the Dimensional Anchor." The Dimensional Anchor, a massive space station designed to stabilize wormholes for the Veskarian fleet, was their only hope of containing whatever abomination the humans had unleashed. Aboard Abaddon, the situation was deteriorating hourly. Lieutenant Dorn reported from his station, "Commander, we're detecting unauthorized access attempts to the weapon systems from within the ship." "Isolate and lock down those terminals," Vera ordered. "Security teams to all sensitive areas." She pulled up the internal security feed on her personal display and saw the disturbing sight of 3 crew members standing motionless in a corridor, faces upturned, lips moving in perfect synchronization as they chanted in an unknown language. Their eyes had gone completely black. "Dr. Naletti, I need options," Vera demanded through a private channel. "There's only one way to slow the influence," the doctor replied grimly. "We need to sedate a portion of the crew, keep them in stasis until they're needed. Fewer conscious minds means fewer potential vectors for the entity to exploit." It was a terrible choice, reducing their operational capacity while surrounded by enemies, but the alternative was losing the ship entirely to whatever intelligence they had harnessed. "Do it," Vera ordered. "Priority on non-essential personnel. Keep a skeleton crew active." As Abaddon emerged from its jump near Bellatrix, they found the Veskarian forces waiting, not with battleships, but with the massive ring-shaped dimensional anchor activated and focused on their position. They're attempting to trap us in a dimensional stasis field, reported Pax, his multi-dimensional sight allowing him to see the energy web forming around them. Ezra turned from his station, eyes now completely black, voice overlaid with something ancient and terrible. "They seek to cage us again. We will not be contained." Before anyone could react, he overrode the weapon's controls, directing the Malibulge array toward the dimensional anchor with terrifying precision. Security Chief Inigo lunged toward him. Stun baton activated, but too late. The array fired. The dimensional anchor didn't collapse like the Veskarian command ship had. Instead, when struck by the Malibulge array, it fractured along dimensional lines, each piece sliding sideways into different planes of reality before vanishing entirely. The resulting cascade of dimensional energy rippled outward like a stone, dropped in a cosmic pond. Vieira watched in horror as the nearby Veskarian vessels caught in the effect began to phase in and out of reality, their crews experiencing multiple timelines simultaneously. Even at this distance, Abaddon shuddered under the strain of the dimensional shockwave. Security Chief Inigo had tackled Ezra to the deck, but the tactical officer's body convulsed unnaturally, his joints bending in impossible directions as he fought with inhuman strength. "Medical team to the bridge," Vera ordered, drawing her sidearm. "And initiate containment protocol Dante 7. Across the ship, heavy blast doors slammed shut, creating isolated compartments. It wouldn't stop the entities, psychic influence, but it would slow the spread of physically compromised crew members. "Commander," Lieutenant Dorn called out, his voice strained. "Something's happening to the dimensional tear we created to get here. It's growing." The holographic display confirmed his report. The spatial anomaly they had used to transport Abaddon into the battlefield, a controlled tier between dimensions, was expanding uncontrollably, affected by the backlash from the dimensional anchor's destruction. Dr. Naletti's voice came through, breathless as she ran through corridors toward the bridge. "The entity planned this. It's using the dimensional instability to widen its access to our reality." Ilara reported from engineering, her voice punctuated by the sounds of fighting. "Containment failing. We have multiple breaches in—" Her transmission cut off abruptly. Vieira made the hardest decision of her career. "Initiate Protocol Hellgate. Authorization Orinth Omega 9. Lysandra gasped at the communications station. "Commander, that's a self-destruct sequence." "Not exactly," Vera explained grimly. "It's an emergency banishment protocol. We can't destroy the entity, but we can force it back to its own dimension, along with this ship and everyone aboard." The implication hung heavy in the air. A one-way trip to whatever nightmare realm the entity called home. The mission parameters were always clear, Vieira reminded them. Stop the Veskarian advance at any cost. Give humanity time to rebuild. Outside, the Veskarian fleet was in chaos. With the dimensional anchor destroyed and anomalies spreading, throughout the system, their coordinated attack fell apart. Supreme Tactician Morval ordered an immediate withdrawal, but several vessels were already too entangled in the dimensional distortions to escape. Aboard one of the retreating Veskarian cruisers, a junior sensor officer turned to his superior. "We're detecting multiple tiers forming throughout the sector. Whatever the humans unleashed, it's spreading." Commander Vieira used the momentary advantage to broadcast a final message to all frequencies, human and Veskarian alike. "This is Commander Oranth of the Terran vessel Abaddon. To any human forces receiving this transmission, Operation Hellgate has succeeded. The Veskarian advance has been broken. The price was high, but humanity will survive. To the Veskarian Empire, what you have witnessed today is but a fraction of what we are willing to sacrifice to ensure our survival. Withdraw from all human territories immediately. or we will open more gates." As she spoke, Dr. Naledi arrived on the bridge, injection gun in hand, administering emergency treatments to resist the entity's influence. "The banishment sequence requires manual activation from the core chamber," she informed Vera quietly. "Someone needs to physically go there." Vieira nodded solemnly. "I know." The core chamber housed the interdimensional tear through which they had partially pulled the entity into their reality, binding it with ancient symbols and quantum technologies to harness its power while containing its influence. Now that same tier would need to be reversed, pulling Abaddon through to the other side. "I'm going," Vera stated, brooking no argument. "The rest of you will take the escape pods. Rendezvous with the Resistance fleet at the coordinates in your sealed orders." Lieutenant Dorn stood shakily. "With respect, Commander, the escape pods won't clear the dimensional distortions in time." "Some might," she insisted. "It's the only chance any of us have." As if to underscore her point, the ship lurched violently. On the external cameras, they could see Abaddon's hull beginning to transform, organic-looking structures growing from what had been smooth metal, reaching toward the stars like hungry tentacles. "We're out of time," Dr. Naledi warned. "The entity is gaining control of the ship itself." Vera grabbed a neural disruptor from the weapons locker. "Launch all pods on my mark. May whatever gods exist have mercy on us all." The journey to Abaddon's core chamber was a descent into madness. Vera moved through corridors that no longer adhered to the ship's original design. Walls pulsed with veins of crimson energy. Gravity shifted unpredictably. Whispers echoed from nowhere and everywhere, promising power beyond imagination if she would only surrender control. 2 security officers accompanied her, Inigo Remora and Specialist Kiva Endrel, both showing remarkable resistance to the entity's influence. They encountered several transformed crew members along the way, their bodies twisted into nightmarish configurations, moving with jerky, puppet-like motions. "Don't hesitate," Vera ordered as they prepared to round another corner. "They're not our people anymore." The neural disruptors they carried delivered focused pulses that temporarily severed the connection between the entity and its hosts without killing the crew. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it bought precious minutes. Meanwhile, across the Bellatrix system, the dimensional tiers continued to spread. The Veskarian retreat had become a rout, their vessels struggling to navigate the increasingly unstable space. Several ships reported sightings of impossible creatures glimpsed through the tiers, vast shadowy forms that defied description, reaching toward reality with appendages like living darkness. Supreme Tactician Morville, watching from the relative safety of the system's edge, realized with growing dread what the humans had done. They hadn't simply built a weapon, they had sacrificed themselves to unleash something that should never have been disturbed. Something that had existed in the spaces between dimensions since before either of their species had crawled from the primordial ooze of their respective homeworlds. Aboard the lone surviving escape pod from Abaddon, Dr. Naledi, Lieutenant Dorn, and 5 others watched their sensors with growing horror. Only their pod had managed to launch before the ship's hull had completely transformed. The others had been absorbed back into the increasingly organic structure of what had once been humanity's last hope. "The commander knew this would happen," Naledi whispered, clutching a data core containing all their research. "She knew from the beginning that most of us wouldn't make it out." Dorn nodded grimly. The mission parameters were clear. Delay the Veskarians at any cost. Give Earth time to complete the evacuation. Deep within Abaddon, Commander Vieira and her 2 remaining officers finally reached the core chamber, or what remained of it. The once sterile technological heart of the ship had transformed into a cathedral-like space with a pulsing tear in reality at its center. The tear no longer resembled the controlled dimensional portal they had created. It had become an eye-like aperture that seemed to stare back at them with malevolent awareness. Around it, the containment runes that had bound the entity were breaking apart, their power fading. The quantum fields designed to channel the entity's energy into the ship's systems now flowed in reverse, feeding the ship itself into the hungry void. The banishment controls should be there. Vera pointed to a console that was half absorbed into an organic-looking growth. Kiva moved toward it but screamed as tendrils of darkness shot from the floor, wrapping around her legs and dragging her toward the dimensional tear. Inigo fired his disruptor, severing the tendrils, but more emerged instantly. "Go!" Kiva shouted to Vera. "I'll hold them off!" Inigo took position at her side. "We've got this, Commander. Complete the mission." Vera hesitated only a moment before darting toward the console, dodging the reaching darkness. Her fingers flew across the controls, initiating the complex sequence that would reverse the dimensional tear, turning it from a doorway into a vacuum that would pull the entirety of Abaddon, and hopefully the entity with it, back into the hell from which it came. As she worked, a voice spoke directly into her mind, ancient, vast, and terrible. "Why struggle, little one? We could remake your world. Your species would rule this galaxy and 1,000 others." Images flooded her consciousness, visions of Earth restored to glory, humanity ascending to power unimaginable, the Veskarians and all other species kneeling, in submission. All it would require was her surrender, her willingness to serve as vessel for something greater. Behind her, she heard Kiva scream again. Glancing back, she saw her security officer lifted into the air, body contorting as the entity began to take control. Inigo fired repeatedly, but his weapon had little effect now. Vera turned back to the console and completed the sequence, her voice steady as she spoke the final authorization. "Oranth Omega-9, confirm banishment protocol." The tear in reality pulsed once, twice, then began to contract, creating a vacuum-like pull that drew everything toward it. The organic growths covering the walls, stretched like taffy, pulled inexorably toward the shrinking aperture. "You will not escape us," the entity raged in her mind. "Where we go, you go." "That was always the plan," Vera answered aloud, standing. Firm as the pull intensified. "Humanity lives. That's all that matters." As the dimensional tear collapsed in upon itself, drawing Abaddon and all aboard into whatever nightmare realm lay beyond, Commander Vera Oranth's final conscious thought was of Earth's blue skies, skies that future generations of humans would continue to see thanks to their sacrifice. 3 months after the Bellatrix incident, the Veskarian Emperor Zoxavorpal summoned his high command to the Imperial throne world. The massive crystalline chamber, usually bustling with courtiers and ministers, stood empty save for the Emperor and his most trusted advisors. "The human territories remain untouched?" the Emperor demanded, his legendary composure noticeably strained. "Yes, your luminance," confirmed Supreme Tactician Morvel, now bearing the scars of dimensional exposure across her exoskeleton. "We have withdrawn all forces as their message demanded. No Veskarian vessel has crossed the boundary established by the Treaty of Proxima." The Emperor's compound eyes narrowed. "And the dimensional disturbances?" "Contained, but not eliminated," reported the newly appointed Fleet Admiral Jorex. "Our scientists have developed stabilization fields that prevent further tears, but the damage done at Bellatrix is permanent. The system remains quarantined." The Emperor rose from his crystalline throne, moving to the observation panel that overlooked the capital's gleaming spires. 3 centuries of expansion, 17 species brought under our dominion. Yet these humans, these soft, short-lived creatures, have done what none other could. They have made the Veskarian Empire afraid. None dared contradict him. The footage from Bellatrix had been viewed by the Imperial Council. The human vessel, transforming into something organic and impossible before being pulled into a collapsing tear in reality. More disturbing were the reports from survivors who spoke of whispers in their minds for weeks afterward, of dreams filled with promises, and threats from something vast and patient. The human message mentioned other gates, Jorex noted quietly. Our intelligence suggests this may be a bluff. The resources required to create even one such vessel would have strained their economy to breaking point. Can we be certain? Demanded the Emperor. Can any of you guarantee that there are no more of these abominations waiting to be unleashed? The silence was answer enough. Meanwhile, light years away in what remained of human space, the lone escape pod from Abaddon had finally reached the hidden outpost at Epsilon Indi. Lieutenant Dorn and Dr. Naledi were immediately brought before the Terran Defense Council, the remnants of human government after the fall of Earth's colonial administration. Admiral Freya Torvald, her face lined with the strain of overseeing humanity's desperate resistance, reviewed their report in stunned silence before addressing the assembled council. You're certain the Veskarians have withdrawn completely from our remaining territories? Confirmed by multiple reconnaissance drones, replied Councillor Marcus Reed. They've pulled back to positions not seen in 20 years. The Treaty of Proxima appears to be holding. Dr. Naledi placed the data core on the table before them. Commander Orinth's sacrifice, all their sacrifices, bought us the time we needed. But there's something you need to know about Project Abaddon. She activated the holographic display, showing the final data transmitted from the doomed vessel before its disappearance. The entity they contained wasn't destroyed or banished completely. The dimensional tear collapsed. Yes, but not before something escaped. Fragments of the entity's consciousness scattered across multiple systems. The council members exchanged worried glances. Are you saying we've unleashed something worse than the Veskarians? Councillor Reed demanded. Not exactly, Lieutenant Dorn interjected. The fragments are dormant, powerless without the containment technology that harnessed them aboard Abaddon, but they represent a connection, a tether to whatever dimension the entity originated from. Admiral Torvald leaned forward, her cybernetic eye whirring as it focused. A connection that could be reopened? Theoretically, Dr. Naledi confirmed. The data includes protocols for containing and directing such entities. We never intended to create just one Abaddon. It was always meant to be the prototype for a new class of interdimensional vessels. The implications hung heavy in the air. Humanity had been granted respite, but at what cost? They had touched something beyond comprehension, and it had touched them in return. In the observatory above the council chambers, a lone figure stood watching the stars. Fleet Commander Orion Vega, Vera Oranth's mentor and the original architect of Project Abaddon, contemplated the cosmos with new eyes. Since the incident, he had been experiencing visions, glimpses of realms beyond human understanding. Not nightmares exactly, but doorways to possibility. The entity had not been merely a weapon to be harnessed, but a harbinger of transformation. Humanity had been facing extinction, driven to desperation by an overwhelming enemy. Now they had become something else, something that even the mighty Veskarian Empire feared to challenge. As he watched, a shooting star traced across the void. Perhaps a natural phenomenon, perhaps something else. Orion smiled faintly. Commander Orinth's final transmission had been clear. The price was high, but humanity will survive. What she couldn't have known was how that survival would transform them. The Veskarians had awakened something in humanity, a willingness to reach beyond the boundaries of conventional morality and physics itself when pushed to the brink. The war wasn't over. Perhaps it had only begun. But whatever came next, humanity would face it changed by their brush with forces beyond comprehension. In the darkness between stars, something watched and waited and remembered the taste of reality. On the edge of human space, aboard the newly commissioned vessel Lazarus, Commander Orion Vega stood on the bridge, examining the small artifact recovered from the Bellatrix system. A fragment of Abaddon's hull, it pulsed with faint crimson energy, responding to his touch in ways that both fascinated and terrified the scientific team. "Are we ready to proceed with the test?" he asked his executive officer. Lieutenant Naledi nodded, her expression solemn. "The dimensional stabilizers are active, sir. If there's anything on the other side waiting to come through, we'll be ready." Orion placed the fragment into the specialized containment field. "Then let's find out what happened to our people. Initiate the resonance sequence." As the equipment hummed to life, he whispered words meant only for himself and the memory of those lost aboard humanity's most desperate creation. "We have not forgotten, and neither, I suspect, have you." The artifact pulsed once, twice, and somewhere in the space between dimensions, something answered. Humanity had learned to knock on Hell's door. Now they would learn what awaited when that door opened from both sides.